Hi, everybody. Welcome to Transition Before Transaction. That's the name we've decided on, right?
Yeah, until somebody makes us change it.
Right. So TBT for short.
Oh boy, okay, acronyms, I love it. Hey, it's a great day to be alive. Always be better to be seen than viewed.
And it's a great day to have a business and have a great conversation with Jay. So today we want to talk about partnerships. We were talking last week about legacy, and it led us off the air to remember some of our recent client stories and conversations about the challenges of partnerships.
Mhm.
So I felt like that you had some great stories to share, and so I thought the listeners and viewers might enjoy that. And I also felt like we could offer some recommendations that might help people set partnerships up to run a little more smoothly. And then if they run into some of those rough patches, that if they employ some of our recommendations, it might help with that too.
Absolutely. And having started two businesses myself with partners, and having both end up becoming situations where, in order to get out of that arrangement, I had to have a coyote ugly moment and basically,
Oh,
gnaw my leg off to get out of it. Um, Not that every partnership ends up that way.
no.
But when there's not enough planning in beforehand on how you're going to get in, because you also need to have a plan on how you're going to get out. If such a thing does happen, you've got to be prepared. So I've had plenty of on-the-job training on what can happen.
Well, and it's interesting because the business that my husband and I had with partners back in the day, we had the intention and set up our exit strategy as we set up the business. I mean, the whole idea of Document Warehouse was to build it to sell it, and the target was Iron Mountain. And we were really fortunate because not only did we sell to Iron Mountain when we felt like the time was right, but our friendship remained intact. And part of that was we all agreed in the beginning that the friendship was one of the priorities.
Well, oftentimes, partners come together when they're focusing on the business and how it's going to operate and what their business goals might be. But it's those other goals that the partners may have that they may not necessarily be on the same page with each other about. And that particularly comes into play when someone decides they want to get out today and the other one does not.
Yeah, and sometimes those things have to do with business, but sometimes those decisions have to do with personal issues. And in a way, I think it's kind of weird that we set up our business relationships and try to separate those things out from our personal relationships. Because as you mentioned last time, our emotions, our heart is as much of a monitor on a gauge on how we're living life as our business and our bank accounts are. So things like health issues, heck, if somebody wants to retire sooner than someone else,
Yep.
I mean, those are just
Divorce.
two. Oh yeah, that's one.
That's a biggie. That can get ugly real fast. And that's when I start getting the phone calls from the business owner who says, okay, my partner's marriage isn't looking too good right now. What do I need to be worried about? Can his spouse take, his ownership of the business way? We're going to have to pay her or him. Those kind of things. Unfortunately, that's when people don't think about that until it happens. So anything you can possibly imagine. People go to jail sometimes. Bad things can happen to good people.
Yes.
So partnerships are important. They can really 2 + 1, 2 + 2, or 1 + 1 = 3, if I can get that right. But sometimes it's 1 + 1 = 0, and knowing that ahead of time and trying to make sure that if you haven't addressed it now, there's no time like the present to take a look at that. Because when the memories are short, when the tempers are high, the only thing that matters is what's in the agreement that's written down and signed.
And I guess reviewed on a regular basis.
It must be reviewed on a regular basis, just like our good friends at the band.
Yes,
we
as you
talked
mentioned,
about
mentioned
before.
that last time. Yes, we did. Hey, Jay, I got into an interesting conversation with a client last week who has a partner, and the partner is somewhat active in the business, but plays a less visible role.
Mhm.
So my client is the person who's boots on the ground, and then the partner is somebody who actually has another job
Mhm.
and invested in the business
Mhm.
kind of as a wealth building strategy. And what's interesting is that through unforeseen circumstances, the partner has that it looks like that person's job isn't going to be sustainable long term. And so
Mhm.
now the dynamic is shifting because the partner is showing some interest in coming into and being as visible as the other.
Uh-huh. And I'm sure the partner who's been full-time in the business is saying, hey, what are you doing? I've got things working out just fine.
Right.
Why all of a sudden you want to get in? And just sort of the same thing happens when I've been away for a couple of weeks and I go home and my wife's like, wait a minute, what are you trying to change here? I got this down to, the way I want it. Don't come in here and start messing it up.
Mhm.
So, and I don't even have to be gone 2 weeks for that to happen. But in any case, it's going to understandable, as well as, one of the biggest issues that also happen as a result of that is compensation, where one partner may think like they're the one doing all the work,
Yes.
or their job is more important, and therefore they should get paid more.
Mm-hmm.
And that could really lead to some bad scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So those kinds of things, you have to constantly monitor them and communicate and make sure that, hey, we understand, right, that we're all in this together, and we understand that we pay ourselves what we can, but we have to always not at the expense of the business growing.
That's an interesting point because I do think that business owners, especially in the beginning, when the partnership is first forming,
Mhm.
they're all excited about the business idea. They're all
Mhm.
excited about the opportunity to work with this person that they like or that they get along with great or
Right.
that also has great ideas. But they don't necessarily take that time out in the beginning to set up a system or a process for what happens if we hit a roadblock?
Mhm.
What happens if we don't agree about whose job is most important? And
Mhm.
what happens if we don't agree about compensation? Or what happens if we want a different role within the organization?
Mhm.
How does that work? And I feel like that is part of the due diligence for prior to signing the agreement of partnership.
Absolutely. I think some people who have who are in a partnership, but all they have is the single piece of paper that just describes we have a partnership and this is partner Jones and this is partner Smith. It's sometimes think to do any more than that, to get into the more the nitty gritty, can become a little stressful. And it's just like when two people who had prior marriages before get married, but before they get married, one suggests maybe we should do a prenup. Emotions really get pretty bad. So people have to understand this is for the protection of everyone. So having a plan, documenting everything, like I said, in the form of an agreement, in form of a buy and sell arrangement, which would also address or should express, the catastrophic things that nobody likes to think about.
Right.
Death, disability, as I said, divorce, bankruptcy, all those things that can be addressed ahead of time while everybody's on the same page and you're able to help participate in that. Because
Right.
once something happens, you can't really change it.
No, and I actually interviewed a guy by the name of Connor Gillivan. He and his partner Nathan Hirsch are on their second business together, and they started a business called Free Up. And they actually started the first business while they were in college, and so, I know, right? And so by the time they decided to close that first business down, they were selling about $23 million in goods on Amazon. And so they closed that down and they started Free Up, which is this marketplace where they personally vet, or have their team at this point vet freelancers. And it's unlike some of the other sites. But what I really want to bring to the attention of everyone today is Connor and Nathan, starting when they were in college, when they had a disagreement, they faced it head on. And they did have disagreements. And Connor talks about in the interview how they have now created this space where when they get together, and they get together regularly, they bring up anything that has to be dealt with. They don't try to shove anything under the rug. They don't try to avoid it to hurt one another's feelings. And they also admit that they have a friendship that's very important to them. So I think it can be done, but I think there has to be a willingness from the very beginning to see one another honestly, to really be willing to say, okay, like if Jay and I were partners, this is my blind spot. And I've told Jay my blind spots, I'm not a detailed person, we could go on. And then the strengths. So Jay's strength is, he's got a great presence on camera. He's had a lot of experience in this area. So the two of us complement one another really well with my outpatient therapist experience. So when you develop a partnership, that's the kind of due diligence you need to start with.
That's terrific. I mean, that you're exactly on point. And, and I know also that your strength is also helping people deal with all the emotional issues in a real in-depth way, not just surface, but in a real in-depth way, to really bring out those things that need to be brought up and to get to the meat, if you will. And a lot of people, both on the client side as well as the expert, consultant side, really don't like to do those things. But it's vital, it's important, because it's part of the motivation of what they're doing, why they're doing it the way they're doing it, and how they have that businesses, they're trying to manage that business. And so that's why that's one that's very often overlooked.
Yeah.
And it comes back to bite you later on.
It sure does. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how to frame that conversation to really get down to the important issues. I think those conversations need to start with learning one another's values, and then which values are in alignment and what the priority of those values are. When you prioritize, and if one partner has a priority of family time and the other has the priority of personal freedom, well, there needs to be a conversation there about who is going to do the tasks associated with the business that are not appealing to either one. When one has a family obligation and the other really wants to get away and spend some free time, how's that going to be worked out? Are they going to take turns? Are they going to spell it out if it's in one area or another? One partner or the other will do it. And then what are the goals? You've talked about that before. So
Absolutely.
How often do you feel like partners really need to look at their goals?
Well, I think they need to look at them, be checking in with each other, if you will, on a pretty regular basis. And it's understandable that that's hard to do when the pace of business is very fast and so forth. But it's like you don't want to let things go too far, because goals do change.
Yes.
Yes. For example, from a financial standpoint, if somebody's got children getting ready to go to college, it's all about focusing on making sure they've got the dollars to get those kids through college. Whereas somebody who doesn't have children, or more than likely doesn't have children at that age, maybe they're out of college already.
Right.
Their focus is totally on retirement now, not
Yes.
about, I got to spend this money. Theirs is I got to save and build my net worth outside my business. So those can be also in conflict. So it's extremely important. Just like, I think we've all heard we need to communicate with our employees as much as we can to make sure they're hearing the message over and over again.
Yes.
You need to communicate with your partner face to face, by phone. I mean, go down the hallway, schedule some time, and make sure that you're keeping up with each other and what's going on.
I also have some friends who, a husband and wife, and their business grew very quickly over a number of years. And what they used to do is schedule a quarterly retreat day. And I call it a strategy day, but what they did on that day was they went over things like goals. They looked at their cash flow. They not only mapped the cycle of their business during those retreat days, they also mapped the cycle of their lives. Like, if somebody was going to be going to school, or if someone was going to be, participating in a sport. As a husband and wife, they had arranged it when the kids were young to have a play area right beside their offices. However, once they were older, it took a different kind of coordination between the two of them. So then too, you have that issue of values and priorities and the goals in change. And so as the company's goals changed, and their family's goals changed, they were able to keep track of that and be on the same page because they checked in regularly.
Well, because I'm not talking about something that's hypothetical that I've actually experienced myself in my partnerships. We would try talking among ourselves, but sometimes it was just easier to have someone come in and basically help us be our moderator, for the lack of a better word, make sure that we are talking about those things that we need to. And when we reach something that's where we may typically have a knee-jerk reaction to, that person can come in who's got no axe to grind to keep us focused on, that's really kind of a side issue, but let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's get back to the focus on what's really important. And it really is a relief to have somebody there that can do that and let them ask the hard questions that need to be asked and help us work through those issues. Because if you've got that on a ongoing basis in some way, it makes life a whole lot easier than I feel like I'm the one who's dragging this thing all on my own. I'm not getting any help, or my partner doesn't understand type of thing. So,
one of the greatest joys of my work is to help people be in that kind of conversation, and then afterwards to see how having that shared experience where both were able to come out with an accomplishment, with a sense of peace about whatever was decided. I love that when that happens. It's so gratifying, and it's so good for the business.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no doubt. And I think we've said this before. We focus on things that are business related because that's where we spend most of our time and our energy, our emotion. But the personal issues, the family issues, the parents who are sick, are not healthy.
Yeah.
Those things are there in the background, and they can very much influences that partner, which then in turn influences the business.
Absolutely.
So you've got to have it's a 360. It's not, we only have to worry about this half. And as we're finding out, and I've seen, we're all living older these days. More and more business owners are having to deal with a parent who's not doing well, and that can affect people so much.
Yes, it can. It can be so stressful. And, I feel like this might be a good time where we could give some specific recommendations to people about how to set their partnerships up to work, and also how to perhaps introduce some new tools into the partnership to keep it flowing smoothly.
Well, from the standpoint, when, what I always find whenever possible, try to have people come together and talk about what are the key issues they need to be thinking about as far as their partnership, from a legal standpoint, as well as, all the other ancillary things we've talked about. I'll talk about those now, just so everybody be clear. I'm not an attorney. I have played one on TV.
Oh, gosh. We're going to let him stay at a Holiday Inn, right?
I had an attorney once tell me, Jay, sometimes you could almost looks like you're practicing law without a license. I said, well, you know what? Somebody has to sometimes. So I like to make sure that we take a look at, with the partnership, making sure that we start with the agreement in terms of let's put in some things that can take care of, that addresses issues that may come up that nobody is prepared to have, as we've already mentioned a couple times: divorce, disability, death. That's going to spell out what happens with that partner's interest if they're no longer able to act on their behalf, their family's behalf. Otherwise, you may have a spouse who has never been involved in the business but needs that income from that business, is suddenly sitting at the table with you as the remaining partner, negotiating what they think that partner's value, really is, all while you're trying to run their business. And that can be extremely difficult. But also to address issues like compensation. How are we going to be compensated? Understanding what each other's personal issues happen to be, and how you're going to handle that compensation, how you're going to handle distribution of profits, and hey, you've got children going to be going to college soon, and I don't, so let's talk about what are we going to, how can I help you succeed in that regard, and not make it well, good luck with that. I'm doing my job.
Right.
You need to do this.
Right.
So I think that those are the in some ways, what if something bad happens, it's almost easier to address because you can. But it's the
Yes.
other things that come into play. You have to really go through that, and you need to do that not just with you yourselves, but an attorney, um, coaches, people who can really help round that out and make sure that everything's being looked at. It's a team sport.
Or somebody like you who's familiar with a number of these things and can act sort of like as a quarterback or to coordinate some of these other advisors that need to be consulted or invited onto the team.
I call it herding cats.
Yes, well,
But it's a job that does call for a delicate touch sometimes. And
yes.
sometimes it calls for a sledgehammer. But that certainly, I very much enjoy working with business owners because they're fascinating.
Yes.
They're very interested. There's no two are alike in any situation, and so it often calls for a very customized way of addressing it. But there's still a process that applies, in each and every time.
And I feel like doing a values assessment, both you and your partner, prioritizing those values, looking at your goals yearly, 5 years out, 10 years out, really looking at what your life priorities are as well as your business priorities. And I would say that really rounding out that sense of awareness of yourself. What are your attributes? What are your skills and strengths? But also, what are your weaknesses and what are your blind spots? And then share those with your partner. And then how can you help one another succeed so that those the blind spots and the weaknesses that the two of you have don't lead to a reduction in profit or reduce your chances of success. And then the other thing is, why not, as Jay has pointed out, things can happen. So why not set up a process for disagreement? Why not look at what your assumptions are, your interpretations in a situation? What are your limiting beliefs that you bring to a disagreement? Look at those things and really share that with one another and as honestly as possible, work through each step of the issue and generate as many options as you can to see which is most in alignment with not only who you are, but who your partner is and what you want your business to be.
Not to sound like always Mr. Doom and Gloom, but I don't know about you, but I remember a while back when I had my will addressed, but I'd never gotten around, my wife and I, to sign it. And we put it off for months, and then we got a trip. We were going to Puerto Rico, and then it dawned on us the afternoon before, we haven't signed our will. We have to have that witness. So we went to the bank the next morning and to get them to witness it. And I said, I bet you don't have this happen very often. She goes, don't tell me you're traveling out of town. You're going somewhere out of the country. And you won't believe how many people. That's what triggers it. And if you've ever been on a plane before with your partner, you'll think about this too when you're suddenly finding yourself flying up over in the middle of nowhere, and you're like, oh my God, the two decision makers in our company are sitting in seats right next to each other.
Yeah.
Who's gonna take care of payroll?
And that's unfortunate, but those things have happened, haven't they?
So have a disaster plan, if you will, a contingency plan. It doesn't have to be anything formalized. You just have it listed there where everybody knows, who the calls you make first to, who's got the, this person or that person has we've authorized them to have the ability to do these things to keep that business going. And that happened after 9/11 when people were out of town.
Yeah,
so it doesn't have to be anything more, than that, but those things do happen. So I really recommend that as part of their overall strategy of trying to make sure they're looking at everything.
And take time out regularly, once a quarter, at least twice a year, to strategize and pull this information together and see what's changed and what's stayed the same and what revisions do you need to make. And include as part of that not only your business mapping, but also map your life, what's going on in your life. So, anything else, Jay?
No.
Okay. So please give us a listen. Let us know if you have any suggestions for us or any feedback. And in the meantime, we look forward to checking in with you again next week.
And don't forget, this is Wendy at Send to Sell. And I'm Jay, Business Owner Exit Strategies. And happy to be here to see you today.
Take care. Bye.